Lydia was unlike any woman Richard Kingsley had ever met. Confident, assertive, and unapologetically herself, she entered Richard's life like a whirlwind. At 38, she had no time for games and certainly no time for men who couldn't commit. So when she found out that the charming Richard had been married and divorced 8 times, she didn't flinch. Instead, she saw it as a challenge. Richard was a man of means. A real estate tycoon in New York City, he was handsome, in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair, a sharp jawline, and a demeanor that radiated wealth and power. His relationships, however, had always been a disaster. His former wives left behind bitter tales of control, arguments, and broken promises. Each marriage crumbled, and each divorce had come with a hefty settlement, but it didn't seem to stop him from diving into the next. When Richard first met Lydia, she was swimming. Her piercing blue eyes and fierce confidence caught his attention immediately. He approached her with his signature charm, offering a flirty smile and a casual, "How are you?" Lydia sized him up with one look, already aware of his reputation. "I am good, but don't expect anything." Richard was intrigued. Used to women falling for his charm and wealth, he wasn't sure what to make of this response. "And why's that?" "Because I know your type, Richard. You've been married 8 times, right?" The directness of her question made him laugh. "Guilty as charged, but maybe you're the one I've been looking for all along." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "If you think I'm going to be number 9 in your revolving door of wives, you're sorely mistaken." Her no-nonsense attitude both irritated and intrigued Richard. He pursued her relentlessly over the following weeks, calling, texting, sending flowers. And though Lydia allowed herself to be wooed, she never let him feel, and though he had control. Lydia had done her homework on Richard. She spoke with people who knew him, researched his previous marriages, and came to a clear conclusion. Each of his ex-wives had allowed Richard to control them. He had a temper, and he used his money as a way to dominate. The moment they pushed back, he pushed them out. Lydia knew if she was going to be with him, the rules had to be different from the start. One evening, over dinner at an exclusive restaurant, Richard finally proposed. But it wasn't the romantic, down-on-one-knee proposal most women dream of. No, this was Richard, confident and arrogant, tossing the idea out casually. "You know we should get married, right?" he said between sips of his wine, looking at Lydia as if it were a done deal. Lydia, who had been expecting this moment, leaned back in her chair and smiled. "We'll get married on one condition." Richard raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "You're going to sign a contract." "A contract?" He laughed, assuming she was joking. "Yes, a contract." She met his gaze, unflinching. "A $10 million contract. If you ever ask for a divorce, you're going to pay me $10 million. No negotiations, no loopholes. You want me as your wife? Then you're going to pay for the privilege." Richard's smile faltered for the first time. He stared at her, caught off guard. No one had ever put him in such a position before. "Lydia, she interrupted him. "It's simple. You either sign the contract or I walk away. I'm not like the others. You can't throw money at me to shut me up, and you certainly won't control me with your temper or your wallet. So, what's it going to be?" Richard was silent, weighing his options. His pride was wounded, but at the same time, Lydia fascinated him. She wasn't afraid of him, and that made him want her even more. "Fine," he said, though his tone was more resigned than triumphant. "I'll sign your contract. The contract was drawn up the next day, and Richard, true to his word, signed it without hesitation. They were married in a small private ceremony a few months later, with no fanfare, just a legal binding of their lives together. But Lydia made it clear from day one that she was not going to be the kind of wife Richard was used to. In their marriage, Lydia held her ground. If Richard raised his voice, she raised hers right back. When he tried to dominate conversations or decisions, Lydia made it clear that they were equals, and she would not tolerate being pushed around. One evening, just a few months into their marriage, Richard came home in a foul mood. He had lost a major business deal, and his anger was palpable. As soon as he walked through the door, he started shouting at Lydia over something trivial, his frustration spilling out in waves. But Lydia was having none of it. "You do not raise your voice at me in this house," she said firmly, standing her ground. "I'll raise my voice if I damn well please," Richard snapped back, towering over her. Lydia didn't flinch. "Then you can raise your voice somewhere else, because I'm not going to listen to it. You're upset about your business, fine, but don't take it out on me. You forget, Richard, I don't need you, and you'll pay dearly if you ever think you can treat me the way you treated your ex-wives." Richard opened his mouth to argue, but closed it just as quickly. He knew she was serious, and he knew she was right. Lydia wasn't going to let him walk all over her, and that was exactly why their relationship worked. For the first time in his life, Richard had met his match. Lydia challenged him, pushed him, and held him accountable. And, strangely enough, he respected her for it. Years passed, and their marriage endured where his previous 8 had failed. Richard learned to control his temper, not because Lydia bent to his will, but because she refused to be controlled. Their arguments were frequent, but they were always resolved. And over time, Richard began to appreciate the balance Lydia brought to his life. He still had moments where his old habits surfaced, where he tried to dominate and control, but Lydia never let him get away with it. And though it frustrated him at times, he knew deep down that she was exactly what he needed. As for Lydia, she had found the key to dealing with a man like Richard. She never let him feel like he had the upper hand. She wasn't afraid to stand up to him, to challenge him, or to walk away if necessary. She didn't need his money or his status, and that made her powerful in a way none of his ex-wives had ever been. In the end, Richard learned that true partnership wasn't about control or dominance. It was about respect, balance, and equality. And Lydia had taught him that lesson in the only way she knew how, by making sure he knew that she was never going to be controlled. And that $10 million contract, Richard never dared ask for a divorce.